Your own government lies as a matter of course, as a matter of policy.
A government that taps your phone, collects your data, and monitors your whereabouts with impunity.
So what's your podcast about?
Oh, it's about psychology, true crime, supernatural stuff, the occasional paranormal or philosophical rant.
Well, maybe I could check it out sometime.
Control a populace already consumed by consumerism.
And I encourage you all to go shopping more.
Los Angeles was once the occult capital of the world, you know.
The reason that dark occult societies sacrifice children is the energy associated with it.
A conspiracy bigger and more secret than the Manhattan Project.
The takeover of America.
By a well-oiled and well-armed multinational group of elites that will cull, kill, and subjugate.
This cabal has at its core a Luciferian belief system. You gotta understand, whether you believe this or not is irrelevant. This is their religion.
The fierce gun battle has led to a standoff between law officers and occult members of a religious compound. You can't say these things.
Your own government lies.
You can't say these things.
Your own government lies.
This is your nautical lantern on the dangerous seas of darkness. Let's push off from the placid shore of the status quo and explore what's beyond the horizon. I am your host, BT, and this is Truth and Shadow, your podcast of the supernatural.
Patterns. They're everywhere once you start looking. On the money in your pocket, the geometry of government buildings, even the stained glass of cathedrals built a millennia ago. We call it art or tradition, but it's an instruction manual. Remnants of a language older than memory. I used to think secret societies were myths, stitched together by paranoid minds. Now, I think paranoia was just the mind trying to warn us of some kind of myth buried deep in our DNA. Because the truth is, symbols aren't decoration, they're circuitry. They're part of a computer chip system. Every curve, every cross, every eye in a triangle is a diode or circuit wired into the human psyche. You see it, and something inside you aligns with it. That's how mind control works, through familiarity. The ones who built these emblems understood that belief is more powerful than any weapon. If you can shape a symbol, you can shape the mind. And if you shape enough minds, you shape reality. The old gods, the sinister forces, they never vanished. They merely changed names. They've traded temples for corporations, altars for handheld screens. Every logo glowing in the dark is a sigil, and every brand jingle is a quiet invocation. The ancients called them deities, but perhaps we call them the algorithm. And that's what secret societies have always done. They keep the current flowing between thought and matter. And they know that ritual isn't superstition. It's a kind of repetition, and in that repetition, the human mind can be rewritten. And so when millions chant, post, click, scroll, that ritual completes itself. Turns out the altar didn't need blood anymore. It just needed more human attention. Lately I've been thinking about dissociative identity disorder, and about how the mind fractures to protect itself from traumatic events. And if individuals can do it, why can't cultures? And looking at that, I see that we've split into tribes, ideologies, political movements, and each fragment is convinced it is correct. And that fracture cannot be by accident. Probably is from some kind of design. Turns out when people are divided, they become predictable. Predictable people are programmable. Every time we argue online, every time we choose sides, we're feeding that system. Oddly enough, no matter what side we pick, It's part of the same ritual polarity. As above, so below, as within, so without. Somewhere in our deep collective past, someone or something learned how to use that division. They understood that belief could generate energy, and curiosity or emotion could direct it. In times past, we called them priests, architects, call them whatever you want, scientists. Their descendants today and times past have never stopped the work. And so they operate behind the scenes. A hand here, a whisper there, but no matter how much money they have, that's not what they're after. They're after changing your consciousness. Because once you control the human perception, you control their reality. Now, I've read some interesting reports about people who suffer from these fractured personalities. Some of them seem to speak in languages they've never learned, or that they draw symbols they've never seen. The world of psychology can call it coincidence. Parts of faith call it possession. And if I give it an honest look, maybe they're describing the same thing. And that means healing doesn't require mere therapy. It requires a form of exorcism to extricate ourselves from the system. To integrate the self is to take back what that ritual has stolen. And integration might be the only rebellion left, because a unified mind cannot be manipulated by symbols. Once you know the pattern, it loses its grip on you. The power of symbol ends the moment you recognize it as a tool, and not a god, for lack of a better word. That's why knowledge has always been forbidden. Deep knowledge is called occult. And it's not because the truth of it is corruption, but because it can free your mind. And the first true rebellion was against ignorance. Maybe that's what all this chaos is, the world's long-delayed awakening. But awakening hurts. When the fractured mind starts to heal, it remembers everything that broke it. And maybe that's why the world feels like it's coming apart, because healing does require kind of breaking. So if you're listening to this, remember, the war for your soul doesn't happen in cathedrals or crypts. It happens at the end of your attention. Every thought, every click, every scroll, every choice of what you pay attention to, even if it's a screen, is a ritual act. Every moment you remember who you are is an act of resistance. Maybe that's the only light left to carry. We're designed to conquer the shadow and to enter into truth. We are the resistance. Hidden beneath the symbols etched into our currency, the architecture of our cities, even some of the rituals we call tradition, lies something older. Secret societies, shadows within the shadow, binding themselves by oath, blood, and ancient geometry. They've whispered into the ears of emperors, guided revolutions, and rewritten history in plain sight. The rise of what some call sinister forces, those invisible architects of belief and fear, have shaped our species for millennia. They wage war with symbols, and if you know how to read them, the world starts to look less like chaos and more like a script. Here, we'll follow the trail through the sigils, secret orders, the subtle manipulations that have led mankind to this moment. Because once you see the pattern, you realize the truth isn't hidden at all. It's right in front of us, staring back from every monument, every seal, every screen. To walk us through the sinister empire is a guest who has kept her finger on the pulse of darkness, her ever-watchful eyes focused on the right. She's the keeper of the word, the pilgrim of light, and the watcher of the veil. Amy, welcome to Truth and Shadow Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Fun times.
It will be fun times. Secret societies, my goodness.
I know.
Yeah, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my name's Amy, and I actually have a podcast too called Eyes on the Right Podcast. I have a couple Instagram pages that I run, and those are like my fun things, but my real job is a counselor. I'm a counselor, and I work with people just all sorts of things, anxiety, depression, addictions. But I also work with people coming out of occult ritual abuse, satanic ritual abuse. So lots of interesting things going on in my life.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It's good stuff being a counselor and being able to talk to people through their problems.
Yeah, I love it.
So one of the things that I notice is you have a passion about talking about secret societies and some of the stuff that's kind of going on below the surface.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious if you find that these fingerprints are a lot deeper than the surface and what you found.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, secret societies are interesting. And I think even the title secret societies draws us in because we're like, well, what's the secret? Like, tell me more. And, as you start to develop just an understanding of the underbelly of our world and how secret societies have been formed since inception, really, since the beginning in the garden, it's all about this secret knowledge. It's all about becoming godlike. You start to realize that these societies are what forms our world, like I mentioned, and they speak through symbols, they speak through patterns, they speak through numbers. So, that's kind of an overarching idea about it. But yeah, it goes deep for sure.
Yeah, and when we talk about these secret societies, are we really talking about like men in robes and they've got like passwords and secret handshakes, or is there something a little bit deeper, something that's really far back, something that's part of a way of thought, a way of people thinking that goes, where does it go back to?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think our idea of what secret societies are is really formed by Hollywood. So we kind of have, what's the movie with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman? Eyes Wide Shut. So you've got this idea of what that looks like. There was an old Mel Gibson movie called Conspiracy Theory. So he touches on kind of some of these underbelly things. And yeah, I mean, that definitely is part of it, right? Like that is part of it. The rituals, the robes, all of those things. But where did they get that from? Where did it derive from? I mean, that's the physicality of it, but the spiritual driving force is spiritual. The driving force is spiritual. And a lot of these ancient teachings of the secret societies go all the way back in the Bible to the Old Testament days when they were worshiping, the pagan gods and creation and, the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians and the Babylonians. I mean, this is where the secret societies and the mystery schools, in my research and understanding, this is where they come from.
Yeah, and there's a lot of symbols here. And so if you're looking back, Mesopotamia, the ancient cultures of Central America, and we see some symbols are pretty reoccurrent. The eye. Well, I mean,
right.
We all have eyes. So, I mean, it seems to be like a normal development, but not the placement, not the use. Things like the pyramid, the things like pillars, the use of the handbags you see everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, we have all these things, and it seems like we're either looking at a cultural memory or some kind of deliberate communication being handed on to a new generation of individuals.
Yeah, that's a great point. The symbols and the ancient symbols are really interesting because I kind of have a theory on that too. I mean, it's not only like a language, right, that you have to learn, and it's a great way to communicate. It's kind of like being in a secret club where only the members know the secret handshake or the secret sign or the code word, right? Like it lends towards secrecy. It lends towards elitism. And I think the allure of the symbols are a huge part of it because it's a message that can be conveyed that is hidden and masked and veiled. And that's part of it. But I also think the symbols, when you look at them, are also sigils. So they're power sources. And when you look at the pyramids, like in Egypt, those are actually, that's not where the pharaohs are buried. They're buried in the Valley of the Tombs. And so when you look at these pyramids, what were they originally used for? Frequency, energy, they are portals of sorts to hold an energy. And I think that's what these ancient symbols are. And you even see in occult and satanic rituals, they use sigils, they use symbols to have as a focal point for the spirits to come. And in this case, it's demonic, right? But it's really fascinating as you kind of peel that back a little bit more too.
Right. And I spent some time reading and looking at Jungian psychology. So I'm going to wax a little bit here on archetypes, but it's an interesting thing because the Bible uses the words like powers, principalities, and things of darkness. Carl Jung, kind of in the Platonic way, is kind of looking at archetypes as things you can kind of pull down out of thought, out of the collective consciousness, I guess you can say, or he would say. And he'd pull these things down, but he acknowledged that there was some kind of metaphysical existence. And so when we look at certain pagan gods, like let's look at the Romans or the Greeks, I mean, it's like these gods are like mirrors of humans. They're debauchery. They do all the dark stuff that humans do. But if we look at the Egyptian gods, the Sumerian gods, and some of the gods in central Mexico, we see something completely different. We don't see human reflections. We don't see that they behave the way humans behave. And so when we're looking at that, do you think with those entities like those Egyptian or even some of the early gods of the Levant, really, so Baals and things like that, are we looking at forces that may be spiritual originally?
Interesting. So like the actual Egyptians, like the pharaohs themselves, could they be spiritual? Is that what you mean?
Well, their gods, Ra, Anubis, Horus, they all seem to be based on supernatural forces. They don't seem to be based on humanoid forces. You know, if we look at like Zeus and Hera, you know, it's like the cheating husband and the all-forgiving wife, right? So, I mean, these things are kind of human in Rome and Greece, but not so much in Egypt or Sumeria, where they have things like the Anunnaki, the Watchers. They have these gods that, well, they said come down from the heavens.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah, and it's almost like they're tied more to creation in a deeper way. And I think that lends to even how God brought on the 10 plagues, because each of those plagues represented one of the gods that Egypt was serving. So like, again, it goes back to that idea of creation over creator. And I think you're right. I mean, it really does lend to the idea that there is something more spiritual there. There is something different. Like you said, there is a difference there. And yet there is kind of this underlying similarities too, because you've got these many different facets of death, rebirth, you know, that the ancient Egyptians thought of, but also like other cultures did too. It's really this idea of kind of knowledge of death and the afterlife and things like that. And so you kind of see these common themes permeating through. But yeah, it's really interesting. That's a fascinating question.
Yeah. No, it's just something that I seem to notice that, you know, if we study Jung, the archetypes seem to fit a little bit better with Greek or Roman mythology. I have a hard time identifying the archetypes with Egyptian or Sumerian because they're so, I'm going to use the word alien, but I do not mean little gray men. I mean, it's alien is, you know, extra dimensional entities. They are spirit, and they seem to be infinitely more intelligent than humans.
Yeah. Really interesting. I mean, and then you start to study just the origin story and how that plays into these ancient cultures, even like the Native Americans and those in Peru and different parts of the world, how their stories were so similar about creation and the flood and the 7 stages and then Anunnaki and how they came down and taught them this kind of secret wisdom. I don't know if I'm touching on your talking point, but that's where my brain goes.
No, that's exactly what it is, because once upon a time, the development of writing as a technology kind of came into the world. If I use the word fully formed and an anthropologist goes, oh, wait a minute, it wasn't fully formed. We did this first. Well, we have emojis today that can express a lot of words. And because emojis are really simple to express words, symbols can express words too, which means it's language. And it seemed to come almost fully formed from the beginning. But if we look at cuneiform, the Sumerian writing, that's triangles and dashes and lines. That's weird, right? That's not symbols. That's something completely foreign, really. That's a language that's having to be written out that way. And so it's kind of like writing becomes this secret transmission of knowledge then. And that means if it's a secret transmission of knowledge, would these groups, these mystery schools, if we call them a better term than secret society, these mystery schools have been shaping humanity then for centuries? Do we even know what an end game would be for them?
Interesting. Yeah, well, it's interesting you bring that up in terms of end game, because I think if we travel back, let's just say 10 years, because I've really seen the rise in the deeper understanding of the secret societies, the mystery schools in, I would say for me, the last 10 years. Has it been before that? Of course. But because of the rise of social media and all the things, we start to see more people kind of spreading this. So with the rise of an understanding of what we might call the uninitiated, that's what they would call us. Let me clarify. They would call us the uninitiated. We are the ones that don't know the secret knowledge. We're not at the top of the pyramid. They are. We're at the bottom. So, or if you look at it as a circumpunct, we are the outer part of the bullseye. They are in the center. So, but as these 10 years have gone on, the uninitiated, AKA you and I, we've become almost not initiated, but we have come into a consciousness, a higher consciousness, they would say, of the underworkings and the symbols and all the things that they use to communicate to each other. And if you look at Alice Bailey's writings, she influenced the UN. I'm sure you know about her, BT. It's like highly, highly new age, highly, influential on the United Nations. Her teachings talk about 2025 would be the year where the uninitiated would come into an initiation of sorts, a higher consciousness. I can't say that word. And she wrote this in her externalization of the hierarchy. And why I'm saying this is because I believe that they were demonically inspired to do this, to bring people to a higher consciousness, to prepare for their false messiah, their Maitreya is what they call them. And so I think this is all part of the plan, is my point. Getting us all kind of interested in this to rise our awareness to prepare for what's to come.
No, that's good. And it's something that's kind of interesting. You use the word circumpunct, and I think that's a good symbol to kind of examine for a moment. I do traditional archery, and that means I have a target set up that has the various rings, the outer ring, a middle, and then a center ring. And that's an interesting design for a lot of different reasons, because it's like, why that design? Or if anybody plays darts, why is it that design? Why is it a circle? Right. And why is the more points the closer into the middle you get? Or, well, there's a couple of small ones around one of the middle rings, but that's neither here nor there. There's more points in gathering your arrows or your darts in the center of the board than anywhere else, and that seems to lead into what you're talking about, where different people of different initiations have to pierce into the inner circle.
Yeah, it's almost like that for sure.
So if we're going to talk about, let me see. I'll find it here. So with that idea, like I just said, the archery board.
Yeah.
Some can just say, hey, that's a design, right? It's just a design. A circle makes sense. Well, whatever. I don't think it would, but right. But if these are symbols about something deeper, what kind of, and it's a sigil, what kind of power could be transmitted by utilizing this sigil, whatever it happens to be, throughout the centuries?
Interesting question. So what's the importance of utilizing that throughout the centuries? Well, gosh, I don't know if I have a really good answer for that, except for it's probably multifaceted. It's a way to communicate. It's a way to bring people into a higher consciousness, a higher level of enlightenment, tapping into kind of that hidden occult mystery schools and what meaning it is for them. We don't really necessarily look at it as anything but a bullseye, but there's multi-levels of layering of meaning. And so I don't know necessarily how that plays into us as just the general public, but you know, when you start to see that harnessing energy in a collective conscious with the public is part of a spiritual process too, then you kind of wonder, okay, is there more spiritual aspects to this that we just don't really understand? And I don't know if I explained that very well. So if you have another question, please feel free to follow up. But
well, that's fine. Let's see if I got a follow up for that. Okay, so when we look at symbols, we could say that they are more than meets the eye, I guess, to be punny about it. But symbols are more than meets the eye. They really are. There's a lot of information in a symbol of some kind.
Yeah.
Smiley face can mean I'm happy. It's also a symbol associated with a serial murderer or a cult of murderers in the United States and the world. And so if we're looking at those as possible outgrowths of a secret society, and we were to maybe play devil's advocate with the symbols and things like that, would it be possible that they are simply keepers of knowledge? Like they are holding on to geometry, they are holding on to astronomy, that they're holding on to mathematics. And if they're doing that, where does it become manipulation?
Interesting. Well, I think if we travel back and we think about who is the originator, who is the creator, that's God, right? And everywhere we look, there's, the golden ratio, that's geometry, that's, all of these beautiful workings of mathematics and science working together in creation. And so I think it would be just like the devil, the enemy, to take creation and twist it, which he does. So when we look at symbols, let's say the circle, that was created by God. And and we know our world is built with energy and frequency. We know that our bodies are that, we are conduits. And so it's like when you start to see how the enemy can kind of twist God's creation that was intended for good to bring about a power of sorts, then we start to see that symbols are probably more than meets the eye. It's almost like this bridge or connection from the visible world to the invisible. And the perfect example of that, going back to the circumpunct, is the magic circle. When you look at occultism and you look at witches or warlocks, what do? They draw a pentagram, they draw a circle. And in that circle, they believe the focal point and the energy can be harnessed. And they'll put salt around the outside, with candles, whatever. That's not the purpose. The purpose is that circle is a portal or a harnessing of energy. And so what does that do to us as a public when we constantly see these symbols? I mean, maybe something, maybe not. But when you start to get these symbols integrated into big events like a concert or other things like that, and you start to throw in some kind of spell casting and the demonic, that's a harnessing of energy, in my opinion. And so that's where I think that's the bridge to the visible to the invisible comes in, because you don't even realize that you could be potentially participating in something spiritual. You just think you're at a concert, but it's formed in a symbol that creates an energy that they're very aware of. So that's the best way I can kind of explain that. It's a deep question though, for sure.
No, that's good, because none of us were alive to see the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II.
Yeah.
But we have seen in recent years the coronation of King Charles the Third.
I don't even know.
I'm not English. This is not a requirement for my life.
Right. Thank you.
But we see the rituals. They show up in coronations. They show up in pop videos, Taylor Swift concerts, to simply put it out plainly. And even honestly at political rallies, they are there. And Morpheus in the movie The Matrix holds up a battery and says, "This is what you are." And I think that's very powerful as a statement. It's not like, yes, it's in the movie The Matrix where everybody's basically just fueling the Matrix with their bioelectric energy. But I really think that humans, because we are electromagnetic entities, we have that. We are giving their power. And so, we're talking about, as these days come along, it's more and more prevalent that the occult has become mainstream.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to look at.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. I mean, you really start to see, like I said, it becomes like a spiritual container of sorts. And I'll never forget this interview of this ex-Satanist that I watched. And he said that he would shave his head and draw a sigil on his bald head. And that was the focal point for the demonic. So right then and there, I realized, wow, symbols, sigils are an important part to the occult, to the demonic, for spiritual forces to make a container, a focal point, to focus whatever their intention is. And I just find that fascinating.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
Because let's pull out, Jesus does this exorcism, and he talks about how if it goes out and comes back and it's like, oh, it's all nice and orderly in here, and it goes and he brings in like a bunch of his buddies and they take up residence again in the person. And this is kind of an interesting thing, because it's like certain entities are looking for, I'm going to use a body to inhabit, and I don't have to mean a person. They are looking for things to inhabit. Lamps. The genie myth doesn't come out of whole cloth for no reason. So a lamp can be controlled by a disembodied spirit of some kind. Like you said, sigils. The sigils are a harnessing power of a specific entity that's drawn to that entity, like in the Lesser Key of Solomon, whatever that image is, that entity is drawn to that symbol, like a magnet. And if we're looking at that, do we know what we're dealing with besides supernatural forces? I mean, are we looking at some hidden elites that use these things to draw in these forces? Or are they, I'm going to use the word puppets. Basically, does it seem like these hidden elites are more like marionettes for the demonic?
Yeah, I would say yes. And that's the deception there, because there's a false sense of control and power, but are they really in control and power? No, they're not. And whether they're knowingly or unknowingly being used or bringing these forces in, we don't really know. But it's interesting, because you just see how they are manipulated. And I'm sure the symbols that are used, even when you look at symbols in Washington, D.C., you see these very intentional symbols, very intentional structures. And you just start to think, there's got to be more here.
Yeah, I grew up in the, paying attention a little bit more to world, late 80s and then through the 90s. And something that we used to draw in school all the time was the Stussy.
Oh.
You remember that?
The brand?
That S shape.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
I remember that.
There you go. I mean, and it was like everybody was learning how to draw this symbol. And it really seems to be like maybe something that draws people in. Like, you know, not everybody could do it. There were people who did fumble, who couldn't actually make all the lines do what they were supposed to do. So it was a little confusing for some people. It's the same with like an equilateral pentagram. A lot of people can't draw a perfect pentagram, but those who can, they're kind of like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of group of individuals. Do we see any other symbols today that are similar to something like that, like I just mentioned, from the 80s, 90s?
Right. That people kind of draw like without even thinking about it.
We see all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you said the happy face. I mean, I think there's deeper meaning there. I don't necessarily know what that is, but I think there's a deeper meaning to the sense of all of us using emojis. And you touched on that too. Yeah, that's really interesting. I can't really think of any off the top of my head, but I remember as a kid too, just drawing those 3D squares, you know, and connecting the lines and just thinking that was like the coolest thing, you know, and wondering, and I have a lot of people, I will say this, the people that I work with that have come out of, you know, that have DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, who've been through occult ritual abuse, will be drawn towards certain patterns and shapes and symbols. And why that is, I don't know if I have a deeper answer. But I think it's everything that we're touching on. I think there's a lot of moving parts to this. And I think it has to do with the subconscious, with the soul and the spirit and the physical and the unseen, and kind of this bridging of like channeling or controlling spiritual forces in some way that, you know, you mentioned the lesser keys of Solomon, you mentioned that. And why were there sigils involved in those types of things, in those writings and stuff? Like there's something there, you know? So I don't know what it is though.
Yeah. Well, you gave me a thread to pull for a little bit. So with dissociative identity disorder, the 80s, we had the satanic panic. It was kind of 80s through the 90s, I guess. So we had this like, it was a moral panic designed to either scare people into understanding, you know, saying certain things or this or that or of the devil or whatever. I mean, I heard that nonstop, oh, that's of the devil all the time. And it was like, no, whatever. But okay, if we're going to look at someone with the dissociative identity disorder, what goes into making an individual into that? What needs to happen first?
For fracturing?
For fracturing, yes.
Or yeah. So that's a very complicated thing. And it actually ties into, the roots of it tie into secret societies. So we kind of can loop it all in. So DID, for your listeners, previously was called MPD, which is multiple personality disorders. And now it's called dissociative identity disorder. And I look at it as kind of a sliding scale, because a lot of us dissociate or disassociate, however you want to pronounce it, to varying degrees. I mean, we can be driving on the freeway, we miss our off ramp because we're just spaced out somewhere. But then you have way to the other end where you have intentional people who are intentionally creating fractures in children, typically because their brains are more, they're still developing. Those are intentional, and those splits or fractures can be used to create different personalities. And at the very evil part of it, there are demonic forces attached to those personalities. So with that said, what goes into that? I think that was your question, right? Okay. So if we're going to look at the extreme end, it's very complicated. It's very intentional. And most of the time it involves sexual abuse, torture, drugs, alcohol, the demonic rituals, death, sex, all of it. It's the most horrendous things you can think of. That's what they do to create splits in children to get them to be like little robots that they can trigger to carry out whatever they want them to do. Be a beta kitten, a sexual pleaser for men or women, be an assassin, someone that comes and carries out, hits and kills, and has no memory of it. Think Jason Bourne. So, it's complicated. It's intentional it's structured. It's very, very organized at that end. Now, sometimes you'll have people who have been in cases. I have clients who have been through horrendous sexual abuse, physical abuse, and they're not necessarily in a satanic coven, or it's not occult ritual abuse. They just have very evil, wicked people who have done this to them, and it causes them to fracture because, believe it or not, it's a coping mechanism that God has instilled in the minds. That's how a child can be abused and wake up the next day and go to school, because they dissociate from the abuse and they carry on. And so that's kind of an overview of how that happens. But the origins that I've researched and people that I know that are well versed in satanic ritual abuse believe the origins go all the way back to the Book of the Dead by the Egyptians. Yeah. So there's your tie-in. All the way back. So this is why you see secret societies.
Right.
A lot of the times are involved with MK Ultra, DID, humiliation rituals, torture rituals, because they're all kind of interwoven together.
Yeah, it's it's an attack on the dignity of the human person.
Yeah.
Right, which
100%
is the image of God. So, if we were to use something like Michael Heiser, Dr. Michael Heiser would say that we are the imagers of God. And so that means an attack against the dignity is an attack designed to go after the image of God.
Right.
I mean, if the brain can disassociate, and it might be, like you said, a way to, like a kid can just deal with this and then go on to school. That's kind of the brain coming up a way to survive the impossible, right? And if it's possible in individuals, do you think that the same thing can apply to culture? That a culture can split identities, that it can split its ideologies and create illusions to stay intact?
Kind of like on a macro level, like dissociation. Yeah, I do, because I think that, if I'm understanding your question, it's like even watching television programming, right? Like it is programming us to relate to certain movies and themes in a certain way. And so when those themes or movies or whatever is presented to us, we respond in said programmed way. And the perfect example might be something like what Hollywood has said aliens are. And you mentioned gray aliens. Well, where did that come from? I believe that came from Aleister Crowley when he summoned a demon named Lamb. It looked just like a gray alien. And guess what? Hollywood loves Aleister Crowley and thus ensued. So my point in that is like, we tend to split, if you will, on a macro level as a society when we are presented with said trigger or alien or whatever it is. We trigger, meaning, and this is a word that's used with DID, they get triggered and that puts them into a certain personality. Well, we do that too. And we don't even realize it. It's when we see an alien, we immediately go to whatever movie we saw, comic book we read, and we think alien, we think UFO, And that's a form of splitting and manipulation in a way, mind control, if you will, which kind of all flow in together.
That's interesting. You brought up Lamb. That was Crowley during a series of rituals, I do believe, in the pyramid in Egypt. And it was 1918, I think. So if I'm wrong, listeners can correct me on that. But what's interesting about that is H.G. Wells had written The First Men in the Moon, and that came out in 1901. And he described the entities as thin, hairless, insect eyes, and they were obviously lunar beings. And they were described as frail, pale, and very intelligent. And so if something like Crowley comes along and he's imagining and drawing lamb, one can simply say, look, lamb for Crowley, because of Crowley's popularity within certain circles, already existed. H.G. Wells already visualized this idea of this alien entity that lived on the moon. And all Crowley did was popularize it. Well, okay, but they kept going with it. Yeah. To the point where we even have a movie called Paul about an alien, right? Named Paul. And it's kind of like, that's really weird.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah, it is weird. I mean, I think you're right. It was at the elemental workings. Yeah. And so are you thinking like he just popularized it because of the connections to Hollywood? Is that kind of your thought on that? Or
Hollywood, if I remember correctly, didn't really get its start until like the 20s. And the reason was because Thomas Edison owned copyrights on how you filmed anything.
Yeah.
So that wasn't really a thing, really. I mean, you had like regular movies maybe being made. But I think that symbols and ideas, foreign, things that seem even more foreign and alien. This is the reason why the Enochian magic system, quote unquote, works for people, is because the language is so foreign to the human brain. That it gets the brain into a specific state of altered consciousness. And that's part of the need for the entities to work, because the brain can't be three-dimensional. It has to be in its, a fifth dimension. It has to be open to the resonance field or whatever we want to call it. But what I'm saying is that Crowley already was experienced and already had read science fiction. And so the idea of this image is already in his brain, and he simply drew it. Right. And children do this, right?
Right.
They can read Bible stories and then they will draw headless horsemen or, that's the Sleepy Hollow, or they draw the four horsemen of the apocalypse or whatever the story might have been. So we know that this is a thing where people can just hear a story and then draw it.
Yeah.
But H.G. Wells didn't put power into it.
I see. Yeah. Or could they have been influenced by the same demonic being that just, I mean, that's an interesting thought, because it's like, it's hard to say, what came first, what influenced what, right? And you think about how Crowley was just so influential on many of these kind of like new age thinkers, but also like Hollywood and artists and musicians and stuff. Like, it makes you wonder, like, was that demonically inspired, and was that a purpose to get the minds prepared on a macro level for the demonic, but also what's to come in the future? I don't know. These are deep questions here.
Yeah, they are. I mean, it's
my brain is, I like it. It's good.
Yeah. The idea with television, and it's, we'll step back a little bit, the silver screen and its development and its use for telling people what to do. There was a point in time when people, when they needed to see or hear or know what was going on, they would have to go to a central place, whatever it is, maybe the newspaper, but there was theater. Theater was a thing where people could go and hear, maybe city council meetings. I mean, these things were important to people, and they felt like they were honest and truthful and real. And then when we have them on a screen, telling them what to buy, which was one of the main uses of the silver screen movies, is they would have commercials on specific products, and it wanted you to buy it. I mean, gosh, the spraying kids with DDT was popularized on black and white television. You got to spray your kid with DDT or he's going to, no bugs on me. I was sprayed with DDT was a commercial on TV. And so you have parents literally spraying their kids.
Wow.
DDT because the television told them to do it.
Yeah. That's wild. It is really, and you're right. I think the golden age actually started like in the 20s. So yeah, I mean, what was the intention even of television? What was the intention of that initially? Promote political agendas, shape public perception, influence culture and values. Like, they knew that the public would want to be entertained. And this is a perfect way to splice in. I even saw like, where they would put kind of like, I can't think of the word now, but they put like subtle, like wording and like not back masking, like but it was something like that, where it was just like subtle little things that they put in these movies. And like, when you slowed it down, you could actually hear them saying something else. I don't know what the official name of that is, but what you call that, but yeah.
It's like the movie They Live, right? Where you had to put the sunglasses on to see the real thing, not the advertisements. You see Obey and all this other stuff. That's what's behind the image. That's what you're really talking about. And they did explore that in a movie. And I think that sometimes these movies come along because they need to tell us what they're going to do or have been doing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's part of the priming, right? The public. And how would they know this unless they were spiritually motivated? That's my deeper thinking, because even with all the priming and all the like things that people do nowadays, they kind of do the gematria, they do the priming in the movies and things like that. And you look at some of these things that you're like, how did they get this 15 years ago now happening today? Can they really plan it out that efficiently? And my rebuttal to that is they're demonically inspired. Like, there is something inspiring them, just like the Holy Spirit inspired the writers of the Bible to write. They have demonic spirits inspiring them to do automatic writing, to inspire their songs, to inspire their movies. And these are, ageless entities that are still around.
It's like
I went on a rabbit hole there.
No, it's good. It's like I tell people that with they can't see the future. They can see probabilities, and the probabilities are based upon experiences because they've been around with humans for however long humans have been around. And so they can go, well, if I do this, this will happen. And so it's a mind manipulative game.
Yes.
And when you look at, as we're talking about things that influence or affect society and culture, we're also talking about the macro level fracturing of society. We are causing, by exposure, by repeated exposure of specific signs, symbols, and sigils, to fracture culture and society into, dare I say, two parties.
Yeah. Keep going.
Just saying. And keep going, right? So if you can divide, right, the system seems to be designed to divide, then it makes sense that we're told that he comes to lie, steal, kill, and destroy. Right. And if I were to add a word, I would say divide. Yeah, that's really good. Well, and, going back to the idea of like the demonic can't see the future, you're absolutely right. But it's interesting as well that there is some intellectualism of sorts with the demonic, because they obviously can recognize Jesus. They can, they know who people are. They show memory recognition speech in scripture, Mark, the book of Acts, Matthew. And so to your point, it's like they're observing, they're watching. There's some intellectualism with these demonic spirits that I believe are inspiring the world and the culture in an unseen way, and it's just interesting how, like you said, they come
the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy and divide. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Because divided people are easy to manipulate, especially people that operate out of emotion, high driven emotion. And look at our world today. I mean, everybody is just so highly triggered and emotional. It's like, calm down, people. Take a deep breath, you know?
Yeah. And that triggers those triggering events. They seem to be seated in fear.
Yeah.
Plain and simple, one word, fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of the ununderstandable, fear of the other, fear. And for the longest time, it seems like any of these entities honestly, they seem to consume fear.
Yeah. I believe it. I think you're right. I mean, and that's why the Bible speaks on that so much, because it's one of those emotions that really is an underbelly of so many different responses that we see: anxiety, PTSD, worry, right? The underbelly of these, even anger, the underbelly of that is fear of the unknown, fear of hurting someone's feelings, fear of what's going to happen, fear of what happened to you. Fear is that kind of underlying emotion that drives so much. And they, air quote, know this. And that goes back to triggering. That goes back to division. That goes back to macro level of manipulation. So yeah, it's all tied together.
Yeah,
it's all tied together.
It is true. You know, there is an occult adage, as above, so below. I mean, I really honestly believe that isn't really an esoteric idea. I think that is something that's woven into the fabric of reality and existence and creation. Totally.
I mean, God is the creator, so all they can do is counterfeit that on earth as it is in heaven. You know, it's kind of a twisting.
So let me ask this question. When you are dealing with individuals who are dealing with dissociative identity disorder, do they commonly use terminology that is supernatural?
Give me a couple of examples.
It could be, okay. They can use the words demon, angel, spiritual, supernatural. They can use a different intelligence, any of these kind of ideas that would put their fractured self into another dimensional entity. Have you heard of anything like that?
With people that are on that extreme end, a lot of times, yes, because of the spiritual aspect of it. When you're a victim of occult ritual abuse or satanic ritual abuse, the main part of it is supernatural and spiritual. So yes, absolutely. I mean, I've interviewed a couple people on my podcast who have shared some very supernatural experiences in a dissociated state. And, you know, it all is very spiritual for them. Seeing the demonic, seeing demons, seeing, supernatural things that you would not normally see. And so I think that, excuse me, is a big part of it because, you know, the Bible tells us to be sober-minded and vigilant. And that's sober is just like not drunk, but also like intent. And so when your brain is fractured and dissociated, it's hard to be very intentional about what's going on around you, specifically if you're getting triggered and kind of coming in and out of different personalities. So think how manipulating that is for the enemy. Like he can really take and manipulate people, make them think something that isn't necessarily true or believe something. And it's dark, it's demonic, you know? So of course there's going to be some supernatural experiences involved in that. And a lot of times, leaving the body, astraling, or being taught to dissociate and leave the body, which happens sometimes in this, because enduring the pain is too much. So the child is taught how to kind of leave the body. imagine what goes on when you leave your body,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and what happens in your dream state. Like, so yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
That's
BT.
good. And,
Okay,
and
yeah.
here's the other thing is, you know, while the DSM might have called it multiple personality disorder, and then they avoided some of these other things, such as the use of hallucinogens to separate our mundane conscience with something else. You see, the use of DMT, psilocybin, and there's a handful of other substances that we can use, ethnogens that can be used to pull the brain or the consciousness apart, like I said, from its three-dimensional prison, to just use some words. But these disassociate people. This is something that people seem to be pushing themselves to. They seem to have a desire to disassociate from their normal identity. And while there is an SRA, satanic ritual abuse, element to individuals who have gone through it, there seems to also be a form of dissociative disorder by mental suicide.
Well, are you saying like people are actively pursuing that?
They seem to be.
Yeah. Whether it's psychotropics or even alcohol or video games or whatever. Right. But what is the root of that? I mean, the enemy knows if he can get you to disassociate, that your brain is not sober-minded and vigilant. It is not guarded. It's not girded. You are in another altered state for X amount of reasons. You are more manipulated. You manipulated in that state. You're easily manipulated because you're not thinking about intentionality. So what a trick of the enemy, number one. But the deeper part of that, especially for me as a counselor, is why are you dissociating? Why do you want to seek something to dissociate? Why are you using that as a coping mechanism? And that's where the deeper hurts and traumas and parts of the soul need to be healed, because there's a rooted reason why you're seeking this out as a coping mechanism. Because I just don't want to deal with life. I just don't want to deal with the hurt that I've been through. I just don't want to deal. I want to chill. I want to relax. I want to relieve stress. So I'm going to reach for name your thing, name your vice.
Right. Name your poison.
Right.
Well, as we wind down, you know, what can we say to people who are struggling or dealing with some of these inner battles? I mean, this is what it is. You know, we're dealing with some of these problems within our own day-to-day life. We may not have access to therapy, but we need to integrate ourselves into the best version of ourselves. And what can we tell people to do to begin to heal?
That's really good. Well, I would say first and foremost, we all need to heal. We all have areas in our life where we need to heal. What is the baseline of what healing looks like? I mean, that is subjective to God, and it's based on his standards and his word. And he is the true healer of the brokenhearted. So you can go to secular psychologists, psychiatrists. You can get all the pills you want, but that's just a Band-Aid. And it always will be a Band-Aid. It can help a lot, but the soul is crying out for its creator, and it's worth seeking him to find that healing. And you know, how you approach that is up to you, but really you can heal with just you and the Holy Spirit. You just saying, God, I'm broken. I've been through a lot and I want to heal with you. Like, that is a starting point. And then you start to recognize those deeper things within you, beliefs, attitudes, thoughts about yourself, others, and God that are not biblical. They're not serving you, I might say. They're strongholds that have built up because of childhood and because of things in life that no longer are who God wants you to be. You gotta renew your mind, and that's the soul. That's your mind, will, and emotions. That's your heart. So the first step is just wanting to heal. And we all need to heal. So I encourage everybody to seek that.
Fantastic. And then let's go ahead and just talk about your links again and your kind of goal with your own podcast, etc.
Well, thank you, BT. So you guys can find me on most major podcast platforms, Eyes on the Right Podcast. I'm on Instagram, Eyes on the Right Podcast, Eyes on the Right 4.0. And, I am a counselor. So my website's biblicalguidancecounseling.com. And my goal for everything, I've been kind of in this field, realm, wherever, whatever you want to call it, space, little tiny corner on the internet for about upwards of 10 years. And my goal now is to shine the light on some of these things that, are a little darker at times, but to bring the hope into it, because we have to find the balance. And that hope is Christ. That hope is God's healing of your heart. It's eternal life with him. And so I will always bring it back to that. And my goal is to do that as best as I can. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming on my show. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. I'm just happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Thank you for listening. This is a free podcast based upon the value for value model. If you find value in this, or any episode, you can return that value by liking the show, subscribing to this channel, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend on your social media accounts. You can also donate on my website. Thank you again. This is BT for Truth and Shadow Podcast. You are the light in the darkness.
I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. You take the red pill. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. You stay in Wonderland. Believe whatever you want to believe. The truth. Nothing more.